Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and on those in the tombs bestowing life. Christos anesti ec necron thanato, thanaton patisas, getis sentis mnimas isoin charis amenos. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and on those in the tombs bestowing life.
We all go through periods of transition. We transition from childhood to grade school, middle school, high school, college, careers, marriage, families, and then the inevitable comes about. We become old. And that can be a huge transition for a lot of us. I was speaking with a friend the other day who mentioned that this young man on the island who has a business that makes caskets is planning on moving. And I thought, well, I should get myself a casket made before he leaves the island, so that I have one available when my monks need to bury me. I recently asked Archbishop Kirill if he would consider raising Father Paul, the co-founder of this monastery, to the rank of igumen or abbot. And he consulted with the Holy Synod of Bishops, and they have agreed to this. Part of the reason why I made this decision is because of the fact that I do need to start the transition process. And I wanted to be assured that Father Paul would be my successor, and that people were used to calling him Abbot Paul. So that's why I made the decision to ask the bishop his blessing to do this. It's been a whole year now since I have been able to serve regularly. In fact, during the past year, I've been able to serve the Divine Liturgy once, because most of the time I'm a little off-balanced and the pain level is too much for me to be able to safely serve the liturgy, so I don't. That has been an issue with me that has, at the beginning, caused me great grief, because as a priest, that's what I lived for, is to serve the Divine Liturgy. But I know that that's not the end result of what God has in mind for me. That's not what God has in store for any of us, because we do change, and we do need to be prepared for transition. As I begin this next phase in my life as a monastic, there are a whole lot of issues that are coming up for me. One of them is that I do my daily blog articles, and I try to do 3 or 4 videos per week. Those are things that I can really do sitting down, so those are good. But I also find that it helps fill the gap for those things that I used to do, that I loved to do. I built all the trails on this monastery, and now I don't even really have the energy to walk the trails. And since I was unable to start those trails, our novice built 2 trails. I haven't been on them yet, but I've seen videos of them, and they're beautiful. And so what it does for my heart is it tells me that there's going to be continuity here at this monastery beyond my time in this life, which gives me great joy and satisfaction. And it's actually a relief. I was talking to an old friend recently who's a year older than I, and he's not in good health, and his One of his sons has moved back into his home to take care of his dad. And my friend is even thinking about selling his house. And he's a fellow that has always been a poet and a reader, and he had a huge, beautiful library. And much of that is gone now. The library that we have here is not my library. Even the cabin that I live in, and that this recording is taking place on the porch of that cabin, is not my cabin. This cabin is monastic cabin. It belongs to the monastery, belongs to the brotherhood. So the only thing they'll have to do when I am done with this life, and the Lord has called me, is change the decor maybe on the interior so that somebody else doesn't have to live at the presence of old Father Tryphon for the rest of their life. But it is something that is satisfying to me to know that what is here was not here for me. It was ultimately built for God. And it gives me great joy and pleasure to know that the monks that I have served for years as abbot and priest are now returning the love that I had for them by taking care of my needs. Having one of my monks bring me over my first coffee for the day is one of those signs that what I have imparted into this community has taken hold, because we are a community where we really are a brotherhood, a true brotherhood, and we love one another. All of us need to know and to face the fact that this life is not permanent, but that the Lord is the one who decides how long we will live. The Lord even decides how our final years will be. An old friend of mine visited the monastery last week, who is in the latter stages of cancer, blood cancer and lung cancer. And when I asked how he was doing, he said, well, his physician told him just recently that he has about a month left of his life. And this man is about 10 years younger than I, a Catholic priest friend. But as sorry as I felt that I will be losing a friend, at my age I've already lost a lot of friends, a lot of dear friends who have died. But the wonderful thing is that every one of those friends has been a believer. Every one of those friends had a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And therefore, every one of them I will see again. We will be united again in paradise. But mostly we need to remember the importance of supporting one another in our journey. When I was in junior high school, I started going to a senior care center in my hometown. And I would go from room to room on Saturday morning, spending about 3 hours, and I would read the Bible in each room to different people. And that's when I became aware that there were many people there who had no family that ever visited them. One of the staff told me there were a number of reasons. Either the family dumped them there and they're on with their lives, or they don't want to come to visit their parent or their relative because it brings to mind that their own life is going to probably end up like that, and they don't want to think about it. But each one of us needs to think about one another. If you haven't told your parents or your spouse or even your children how much you love them, now is the time to do it. We cannot allow ourselves to see the end with being consumed with self, but we must be attentive to the needs of others. A simple way, for instance, is if you're sitting with some old friends in a restaurant, make sure that you have eye contact with all of them, not just focusing on one person that you're in conversation with and that maybe you feel the most comfortable with. Because think about that other person who's perfectly aware that you're having no eye contact with them. And it wounds them deeply. Maybe they don't mention it to you, but they feel it. So let us be aware of the others that God in His love and kindness has put us in touch with. And then for those who are in their waning years, be merciful to them. Be helpful. Offer to buy them their groceries if they're having a difficult time with mobility. If you know someone at church that's always been there but all of a sudden is not there, why don't you stop and check in on them and find out if they need anything from you or from their priest. And if there's someone who has been a devout Christian and has always attended the Divine Liturgy, know that just because they're not there doesn't mean they don't need the community and they don't need you and they don't need the Eucharist. Make it happen for them. And most of all, let them know how much you love them and how much you care for them. And then together, we all continue on our journey into the heart of God. May God make it so.
Both now and ever and unto the ages of ages. Amen. Only begotten Son and immortal Word of God,